The morning sun filtered through the crystal dome of the Galactic Education Center, casting rainbow patterns across the diverse group of students gathering in classroom 7. Professor Vell adjusted his forearms nervously as he reviewed his lesson plan for the day. Teaching interspecies biology had become increasingly challenging since the humans had joined the galactic community. Just 2 cycles ago today would be different, though. Today he was assigning the final project that would determine each student's understanding of apex predator behavior across different worlds. The professor's large compound eyes scanned the classroom, taking in the familiar sight of his mixed species class. In the front row sat Nira, a delicate wisp whose translucent blue skin pulsed gently with her heartbeat. Her people had evolved. On a peaceful world where the largest predator was no bigger than what humans might call a house cat. Next to her was Grok, a massive stone-like being from the high-gravity world of Petra. His people feared very little, but even they had natural predators that kept them humble. The middle rows held students from a dozen other worlds. There were the tree-dwelling arbonites with their long, flexible limbs, the aquatic deeplings with their gill slits still visible despite the breathing apparatus they wore in air, and the energy-based Luxons who existed as contained fields of living light. And then there was the human. Tom sat in the back corner, looking remarkably ordinary compared to his exotic classmates. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and the kind of average build that wouldn't stand out in any crowd back on Earth. Most of the other students had initially assumed humans were one of the gentler species when Tom first arrived. He seemed so fragile, compared to creatures with natural armor, venomous stings, or the ability to phase through solid matter. This assumption had been slowly crumbling over the past semester. There had been small hints that something was different about humans. The way Tom could sit perfectly still for hours while watching something, like a statue waiting for the right moment to move. How he could track the movement of flying creatures with his eyes in a way that made other students uncomfortable. The casual stories he told about his homeworld that left his classmates questioning what they thought they knew about him. Professor Vell cleared his throat, a sound that came out as a melodic chirp through his specialized vocal cords. The classroom fell silent as all attention turned to the front. Your final assignment will test everything you have learned about predator behavior this semester, he announced. You must choose the most dangerous predator from your homeworld and present a complete analysis of how it hunts, what makes it successful, and why other creatures fear it. Excited chatter filled the room as students immediately began discussing their choices. Nira whispered about the mist stalkers that hunted in her world's foggy valleys. Grok rumbled about the crusher worms that could bite through solid rock. The Arbonites compared notes about the shadow cats that hunted in their forest canopies, but Tom remained quiet, leaning back in his chair with a thoughtful expression on his face. The professor noticed the human silence and felt a flutter of curiosity mixed with something he couldn't quite identify. Every semester, Tom's contributions to class discussions had been increasingly unsettling. Not because he was wrong, but because he was usually right in ways that made everyone else uncomfortable. Tom, the professor called out, "What predator will you be studying?" The classroom gradually fell quiet as other students realized the human was about to speak. There was something about the way Tom thought before answering questions that put everyone on edge. It was like watching a calculator work through a complex problem. Cold and methodical, Tom sat forward slightly, his brown eyes scanning the faces of his classmates with an intensity that made several of them shift nervously in their seats. "I think I'll study the apex predator of Earth," he said simply. "The one that eliminated most of its competition and reshaped the entire planet's ecosystem to suit its needs." Professor Vell felt his 4 hearts begin beating faster. There was something in Tom's tone that suggested this wasn't going to be a typical presentation about some large carnivorous beast, the most dangerous predator on your world. Nira asked, her blue skin flickering with nervous patterns. Tom nodded slowly. "It's responsible for the extinction of hundreds of species. It conquered every environment on the planet, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains. No other predator in Earth's history comes close to its level of success." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as students processed this information. Grok's stone-like features creaked as he leaned forward. What manner of creature possesses such power? The massive student asked. Tom's expression remained perfectly neutral as he answered, Homo sapiens. Humans. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the soft humming of the classroom's environmental system seemed to fade away as every non-human student tried to process what they had just heard. Human was proposing to study his own species as the apex predator of his world. Professor Vel's compound eyes focused on Tom with new intensity. In 20 years of teaching, he had never encountered a student who wanted to analyze their own species as a predator. The implications were staggering. You wish to study your own kind? The professor asked carefully. It makes the most sense academically. Tom replied with the same calm tone he might use to discuss the weather. Humans are objectively the most successful predator on Earth. We've eliminated our competitors, dominated every ecosystem, and developed hunting strategies that far exceed any other species on the planet. Plus, I have access to extensive research, data, and personal experience. What Tom didn't realize was that his matter-of-fact description of human dominance was sending waves of terror through his classmates. The casual way he spoke about eliminating competitors and dominating ecosystems sounded less like academic analysis and more like a predator describing its hunting ground. Several students exchanged alarmed glances. The delicate wisp began pulsing, with rapid patterns that indicated extreme distress. The Arbonite's flexible limbs twitched with barely controlled urges to flee to higher ground. Even Grok, whose people feared little, seemed to be reconsidering his initial assessment of the unremarkable human in the back row as Tom began outlining his research methodology with genuine enthusiasm, describing how he would analyze human expansion patterns and hunting efficiency. His classmates were beginning to understand that they had been sharing a classroom with something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The assignment that was meant to be a simple academic exercise was about to become a revelation that would change how every species in the room viewed their human classmate. And Tom, completely absorbed in planning what he considered to be a fascinating research project, had no idea that his academic excitement was being interpreted as the casual confidence of an apex predator, describing its dominance over lesser creatures. The Academy's great library had never experienced anything quite like the research frenzy that erupted after Tom's announcement. Within hours of class ending, nearly every non-human student had descended upon the xenobiology databases with desperate urgency. The gentle hum of data terminals filled the normally quiet halls as students frantically searched for information about Earth, and its dominant species. Nira found herself in the restricted archives at 3 a.m, her translucent skin dim with exhaustion and fear. The documents she was reading painted a picture that challenged everything she thought she knew about peaceful coexistence between species. Her small hands trembled as she accessed another classified report from the initial contact surveys. Earth is designated as a Class 12 Deathworld, she whispered to her study group, her voice barely audible in the vast library space. The gravity alone would crush most of our species. The atmospheric composition is toxic to over 60% of known life forms. The weather includes frozen precipitation that can kill exposed beings in minutes. Guess an Arbonite, whose usual graceful movements had become jerky with stress, leaned closer to read over her shoulder. His bark-like skin was showing stress patterns as he processed the information. But that is not the worst part, he said, his voice rustling like wind through leaves. Look at this section about the predator population density. The document they were reading described an ecosystem so thoroughly dominated by carnivorous species that most galactic biologists had initially assumed the data was corrupted. Earth contained predators in numbers that should have been impossible for any stable ecosystem. Every biome contains multiple apex predator species, Nira continued reading. Terrestrial, aquatic, and aerial predators coexist in numbers that exceed theoretical maximums for sustainable populations. The primary limiting factor appears to be competition from the dominant species rather than resource scarcity. Zill, a crystalline being whose usual soft chiming had become harsh and discordant with worry, projected her findings into the group's shared data space. The human homeworld supports predators that would be considered impossible under normal evolutionary conditions. Ocean dwellers that can consume beings 10 times their mass. Land creatures that hunt in coordinated packs. Flying predators with visual acuity that exceeds our best technological sensors, but even more disturbing than Earth's predator population was the growing realization of where humans fit into this nightmarish ecosystem. Rather than being prey or hiding from the planet's countless threats, humans had somehow become the apex species on a world that seemed designed to kill everything that lived on it. Meanwhile, Tom was conducting his research with the methodical enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved his subject. He had been granted access to Earth's historical databases through the Academy's Quantum Communication Array and was assembling what he considered to be a comprehensive academic study. His research notes, had his classmates been able to access them, would have confirmed their worst fears about sharing space with a human-human hunting success rate in persistence chases approaches 95% when the prey animal is isolated from its herd. Tool adaptation allows humans to convert virtually any object into an effective hunting implement within minutes. Environmental adaptation is so complete that humans have established permanent populations in biomes that kill most Earth species within hours of exposure. Tom was particularly excited about documenting human expansion patterns throughout Earth's history. The systematic colonization of continents, the elimination of competing megafauna, and the development of increasingly sophisticated hunting technologies represented what he saw as a perfect case study in apex predator evolution. He requested access to databases covering human warfare, hunting techniques from hundreds of cultures, extinction events correlated with human migration, and technological development timelines for weapon systems. Each request was accompanied by Tom's cheerful academic commentary, completely unaware of how his enthusiasm for human predatory success was being received. Professor Vell had spent 3 sleepless days reviewing Tom's research requests with growing horror. The human had casually asked for data on topics that read like a guide to planetary conquest. Detailed warfare histories spanning 10,000 years. Hunting technique databases from over 200 distinct human cultures. Records of species extinctions that corresponded exactly with human territorial expansion. The professor's stress response had evolved to help his species detect approaching predators, and every instinct he possessed was screaming warnings about the human student's research focus. He treats the systematic destruction of his planet's ecosystem as a case study in predatory efficiency. Professor Vell muttered to himself as he reviewed another of Tom's requests. He wants to analyze human warfare tactics as advanced pack hunting behaviors. What made the situation even more unsettling was that Tom's research appeared to be completely accurate. Humans were indeed the most successful predator species in known galactic history. No other apex predator had achieved such complete dominance over their environment while simultaneously expanding beyond their home planet. By the 4th day, word had spread throughout the academy. Students from other departments began avoiding the xenobiology wing entirely. The cafeteria fell into unnatural silence whenever Tom entered, conversations stopping mid-sentence as non-human students watched him with the frozen attention of prey animals observing a stalking predator. Tom remained oblivious to the effect his presence was having on his fellow students. He was having the most academically fulfilling semester of his life, working on exactly the kind of interdisciplinary research project he had hoped to pursue when he won the exchange program lottery. His enthusiasm for the project only grew as he uncovered more data about human predatory adaptations. The development of persistence hunting, where humans could literally chase prey animals to death over distances that would kill most predators. The evolution of advanced tool use that allowed humans to hunt creatures many times their size and strength. The sophisticated communication systems that enabled pack coordination involving hundreds of individuals. From Tom's perspective, he was documenting one of evolution's most successful adaptations. From his classmates' perspective, he was providing a detailed analysis of exactly how dangerous the species they were living alongside actually was. The research phase was supposed to last 2 weeks, but by the end of the first week, several students had submitted requests to transfer to different courses. Others had begun avoiding common areas where they might encounter Tom outside of required class time. None of this registered with Tom, who was completely absorbed in his work and genuinely excited about sharing his findings with his classmates. He had even begun considering submitting his research to academic journals, thinking it might contribute to better understanding between species. He had no idea that his academic excitement was being interpreted as a predator's casual confidence. In describing its hunting techniques to its intended prey, presentation day arrived with an atmosphere of dread that seemed to permeate every corner of Classroom 7. Professor Vell had spent the previous evening reviewing emergency protocols and ensuring that campus security was aware of the situation, though he wasn't entirely certain what security measures would be effective if Tom decided to demonstrate any of the hunting techniques he had been researching. The other students had completed their presentations throughout the week, each offering well-researched but ultimately safe analyses of their homeworld predators. Nira had presented her study of mist stalkers with nervous efficiency. Grok had described boulder crushers with his usual stoic demeanor. The Arbonites had analyzed shadow cats while constantly glancing toward the exits, but now it was Tom's turn, and every non-human in the room was experiencing the kind of primal fear that their species had evolved to feel when faced with an approaching apex predator. Tom entered the classroom carrying what appeared to be a standard data tablet, seemingly unaware that every student tensed as he walked to the presentation area. His materials looked harmless enough, but his classmates had learned that humans possessed an unsettling ability to turn ordinary objects into weapons when needed. Good morning, everyone. Tom began with the same friendly tone he had used throughout the semester. I'm excited to share my research on Homo sapiens as Earth's apex predator. The holographic projector activated, displaying what Tom considered an excellent opening slide. It showed an ancient human persistence hunter in mid-chase, with several prey animals fleeing in obvious terror across an open landscape. To Tom, it perfectly illustrated human hunting efficiency. To his audience, it looked like documentation from their species' collective nightmares to understand why humans became the dominant predator on Earth. Tom continued, consulting his notes with academic precision. We need to examine our evolutionary advantages. Unlike most predators that rely on speed, strength, or stealth, humans develop something far more terrifying from a prey perspective. We simply never stop chasing our targets. Professor Vell's compound eyes were locked on Tom with the intensity of someone watching a potential catastrophe unfold in slow motion. The human's casual description of hunting techniques was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone another student might use to describe plant photosynthesis. The key to human predatory success lies in our endurance capabilities, Tom explained, advancing to his next slide, which showed detailed human physiological adaptations. Our bodies are specifically designed for pursuit hunting. We can maintain chase speeds for hours at a time, covering distances that would kill most other predator species. Our prey doesn't escape by outrunning us. They die from exhaustion trying to get away. Several students made involuntary sounds of distress. The concept of being hunted by something that would never stop pursuing them, no matter how far or fast they ran, represented the absolute worst nightmare for any prey species. But endurance hunting is just the foundation of human predatory behavior, Tom said, his enthusiasm growing as he moved deeper into his research. What makes humans truly unique as apex predators is our adaptability. We don't specialize in hunting one type of prey in one environment. Humans have successfully established hunting populations in every biome on Earth. The next series of slides showed human settlements in environments that most galactic species would consider instantly lethal. Arctic regions where temperatures could freeze biological fluids solid within minutes. Desert areas where water scarcity would kill most life forms in hours. Mountain ranges where atmospheric pressure was insufficient to support most respiratory systems. Ocean environments where pressure and temperature extremes made survival impossible for creatures not specifically adapted to those conditions. Humans don't just survive in these environments, Tom noted with obvious pride in his species' achievements. We thrive in them. We've built permanent settlements in locations that would kill most Earth species within hours of exposure. This means that prey animals have literally nowhere on the planet where they can hide from human hunter-snarers' skin patterns were now cycling through distress signals so rapidly that they created a strobing effect. Grok had developed visible stress fractures in his rocky exterior. The Arbonites were making small movements toward the classroom exits, their instincts screaming at them to seek higher ground away from the predator, of course, the real breakthrough. In human evolution came with our development of advanced pack-hunting strategies, Tom continued, completely absorbed in his academic presentation. Early humans learned to coordinate hunts involving dozens or even hundreds of individuals, allowing us to successfully hunt prey animals that were many times larger and stronger than any individual. The slide changed to display ancient cave paintings showing human hunting parties surrounding massive creatures. Dozens of small human figures worked together to bring down prey that dwarfed them individually. To Tom, it represented fascinating evidence of early tactical thinking and social cooperation. To his audience, it looked like documentary evidence of their potential future as prey-human pack hunting became increasingly sophisticated over time, Tom explained. We developed complex communication systems that allowed for real-time coordination during hunts. We created specialized roles within hunting parties, with some humans driving prey toward others who waited in predetermined positions. We learned to use environmental features like cliffs, rivers, and natural barriers to trap animals that were individually superior to us in strength and speed. What followed was Tom's carefully researched analysis of human territorial expansion, presented through maps showing how humans had systematically spread across continents. His academic commentary focused on the methodical efficiency with which humans had eliminated competing predator species and established dominance over previously balanced ecosystems. The expansion pattern is remarkably consistent across all continents, Tom noted, pointing to visual representations of human migration routes. Humans would establish initial populations in coastal areas, then systematically expand inland. Large predator species would be eliminated first, followed by the removal of competitive prey animals. Within a few thousand years of human arrival, most ecosystems would be completely restructured to support human populations by the time Tom reached his analysis of modern human hunting adaptations, including the development of tools that could kill at vast distances and the creation of hunting technologies that eliminated any chance of prey escape. The classroom had fallen into the kind of absolute silence usually reserved for funeral services, the conclusion of my research, Tom said, consulting his notes one final time. Is that humans represent the most successful apex predator in Earth's evolutionary history? We've eliminated virtually all competition, restructured the entire planetary ecosystem to support our species, and we're now beginning to expand our hunting range to other worlds throughout the galaxy. Are there any questions? Tom asked brightly, genuinely hoping for the kind of engaging academic discussion he had been anticipating all semester. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sound of several students' involuntary stress responses. The silence stretched until Professor Vell finally managed to form words, though his voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Tom, he said carefully, do you consider your classmates to be potential prey? Tom blinked in genuine confusion, finally, beginning to register the terror he was seeing in the faces around him. The question seemed so absurd that he almost laughed, but the obvious distress of his fellow students made him pause. Prey? He repeated, tilting his head slightly in a gesture that made several students flinch as they recognized the movement of a predator tracking targets. No, of course not. You're all intelligent beings. Humans don't hunt sapient species. The relief in the room was immediate but brief, as Tom continued without realizing the implications of what he was about to say. Well, not anymore, he amended thoughtfully. There was a historical period when humans did practice warfare against other human populations, and we did hunt several human subspecies to extinction, but modern humans have moved beyond intraspecies predation. We've redirected our hunting instincts Toward non-sapient prey and competitive activities, the attempted reassurance had exactly the opposite effect. Several students made choking sounds as they processed the casual revelation that humans had literally hunted other versions of themselves to extinction. Kess raised a trembling limb, his bark-like skin showing patterns of extreme distress. Your species practiced predation on your own kind? That's actually a common misconception, Tom replied, happy to clarify what he saw as an important academic point. Most human-on-human predation wasn't about nutrition. It was territorial competition. We eliminated rival populations to secure better hunting grounds and resources. Though there were some cultures that consumed defeated enemies as part of dominance, displaced Professor Vell felt his four hearts begin racing as he processed this information. In all his years studying predatory behavior, he had never encountered a species that casually discussed hunting their own kind to extinction as though it were a minor historical footnote, but that's ancient history, Tom continued, still oblivious to the horror he was generating throughout the classroom. Modern humans have evolved beyond that stage. We've redirected our predatory instincts into other channels. We compete in elaborate physical contests, engage in complex strategic games, and focus our hunting behaviors on non-sapient species and environmental challenges. Nira managed to whisper, her skin flickering with panic patterns. Oh yes, Tom said with obvious enthusiasm. Humans regularly seek out the most dangerous environments on Earth for recreational purposes. We climb mountains that can kill us, dive to ocean depths that would crush most life forms, explore polar regions during their most hostile seasons, and deliberately expose ourselves to weather conditions that would be lethal to most species. It's how we satisfy our predatory drive for challenge when we're not actually hunting. The revelation that humans actively sought out deadly situations for entertainment was somehow even more disturbing than everything that had come before. Let me show you some examples, Tom said, activating new slides that showed humans engaging in what could only be described as voluntary exposure to lethal circumstances. The images showed people scaling vertical cliff faces without safety equipment, swimming in waters filled with Earth's apex marine predators, launching themselves off mountain peaks with primitive fabric wings, and deliberately seeking out violent weather phenomena-based jumping, free diving, extreme mountaineering, storm chasing, Tom narrated cheerfully, pointing to each image in turn. Humans have transformed surviving unsurvivable situations into competitive sports. We literally compete to see who can come closest to death without actually dying. Grok's rocky exterior was developing new stress fractures as he contemplated a species that treated lethal danger as a form of entertainment. This is actually crucial for understanding human psychology, Tom continued, moving to what he considered a particularly insightful aspect of his research. Humans require constant challenge to maintain mental health. When we don't have genuine threats to overcome, we create artificial ones. It's why human societies develop increasingly complex competitive structures in everything we do. Professor Vell found his voice again, though it trembled with the effort. Tom, do you understand what you're describing? You're talking about your species as though humans are inherently violent, not violent, Tom corrected earnestly. Competitive. There's an important distinction. Violence implies random aggression. Human behavior is strategic and goal-oriented. We identify targets that need to be eliminated or overcome. Then we pursue those targets with complete dedication until we achieve success. The casual description of humans as beings who identified targets for elimination was somehow more terrifying than outright violence would have been. What kind of targets? Zil asked, her crystalline form chiming with barely controlled panic. All kinds. Tom replied with growing excitement as he moved into what he considered the most fascinating aspect of human nature. Humans don't just hunt physical prey. We hunt concepts, diseases, social problems, technological limitations, environmental obstacles. We identify abstract threats and pursue them with the same persistence our ancestors used for tracking animals across continents. The idea of humans hunting abstract concepts was more frightening than anything that had come before. The implications. of sharing a galaxy with beings who treated problem-solving as a form of predatory behavior was staggering to contemplate. To have eliminated diseases that plagued humanity for thousands of years, Tom continued enthusiastically. We've restructured social systems that we determined were inefficient. We're currently hunting solutions to challenges like aging, resource limitations, and the barriers that prevent us from expanding to other star systems. When humans identify something as a problem, we pursue solutions with the same relentless determination that we once used to chase prey animals to exhaustion. Professor Vel realized that Tom was describing a species that had evolved beyond physical predation into something far more dangerous. Humans had become predators of reality itself, systematically hunting down and eliminating anything they perceived as an obstacle to their goals. Look around this room, Tom said, gesturing to his classmates with genuine warmth. Every species here has something that humans would want to learn from or work with. Your bioluminescent communication, his environmental adaptation abilities, her energy manipulation techniques. Humans don't see other sapient beings as prey. We see them as potential partners in hunting bigger targets. The intended reassurance had the opposite effect as students realized that the humans saw them not as prey, but as tools to be acquired for use in hunting even more ambitious targets. Tom looked around the silent classroom, finally beginning to sense that his presentation might not be having the positive academic reception he had hoped for. Is something wrong? He asked with genuine concern, his predatory instincts finally picking up on the distress signals that filled the room. The aftermath of Tom's presentation created what Academy records would later classify as the most significant cross-species psychological crisis in educational history. Emergency counseling sessions were established for students suffering from acute predator stress responses. Several species diplomatic representatives demanded immediate meetings with Academy administrators. The Galactic Education Council convened emergency sessions to discuss whether humans should continue participating in integrated educational programs. Tom found himself sitting in Professor Vel's private office 3 days later, finally beginning to understand that his academic presentation had been interpreted as something far more threatening than he had ever intended. Professor Vel began carefully, his forearms positioned in defensive postures despite his efforts to remain calm. Do you understand why your classmates are frightened of you? I think I'm starting to, Tom replied honestly, but I don't understand why my research would be threatening. I was just presenting factual information about human evolutionary development and behavioral patterns from your perspective. The professor explained slowly. You were sharing academic research about your species. From your classmates' perspective, you were providing detailed instructions on how the most dangerous predator they had ever encountered hunts its prey. Tom sat quietly for several moments, processing this information with the methodical thinking that had originally made his classmates so uncomfortable. But I'm not dangerous to them, he said finally. Humans don't prey on sapient species anymore, Tom, Professor Vel said gently. You casually mentioned that humans hunted their own subspecies to extinction for territorial reasons. You described recreational activities that involved deliberately seeking out lethal situations for entertainment. You spoke about humans hunting abstract concepts and expanding throughout the galaxy. Can you understand how that might sound threatening to species whose ancestors spent millions of years evolving specifically to hide from predators? The conversation that followed became a turning point in interspecies relations. Professor Vel began to understand that humans genuinely didn't perceive themselves as threatening in the way other species viewed them. Tom began to grasp that behaviors he considered normal human activities were interpreted as terrifying predatory displays by beings whose evolutionary history had been shaped by avoiding exactly the kind of relentless pursuit that humans had perfected. The persistence hunting, Tom said slowly as understanding dawned. That's not just a historical technique to them. For prey species, something that never stops chasing them is their worst evolutionary nightmare. Exactly, Professor Vel confirmed. And when you described humans seeking out dangerous situations for fun, You were essentially telling them that your species finds deadly threats enjoyable rather than terrifying over the following weeks. What had begun as a crisis gradually evolved into an unprecedented opportunity for genuine understanding between species. Tom volunteered to participate in extended counseling sessions, helping his terrified classmates understand the difference between human predatory capabilities and human intentions toward other sapient beings. The breakthrough came during one of these sessions when Nira asked the question that changed everything. If humans are such effective predators, why aren't you hunting us? Tom's answer surprised everyone in the room, including himself, because that's not what humans hunt anymore. We hunt problems now. We hunt challenges that hurt people or prevent civilizations from growing and succeeding. He went on to explain that modern human predatory instincts had been redirected toward abstract targets rather than living beings. Diseases that needed to be cured, social injustices that needed to be eliminated, technological barriers that needed to be overcome, environmental problems that needed to be solved. Humans had retained all their predatory capabilities, but they had chosen to apply those abilities toward making existence better for everyone rather than simply dominating other species were still apex predators, Tom explained during one session. But we've evolved to hunt things that deserve to be eliminated rather than hunting other people. This concept was revolutionary to species that had always viewed predatory behavior as fundamentally destructive. The idea that predatory instincts could be redirected toward beneficial purposes had never occurred to civilizations that had spent their evolutionary history hiding from predators rather than becoming them. Gradually, Tom's classmates began seeing him in a completely different light. Yes, humans were terrifyingly effective predators by any measure. But they were predators who had chosen to hunt suffering instead of causing it. They were apex predators who used their capabilities to protect and improve rather than to dominate and destroy. The semester concluded with Tom receiving the highest academic honors in the program's history. More importantly, his research had opened entirely new fields of study in applied xenopsychology and interspecies cooperation theory. Universities throughout the galaxy began requesting copies of his presentation, not as a threat assessment, but as a framework for understanding how predatory species could evolve beyond their original programming. Professor Vell's final evaluation noted that Tom had successfully demonstrated that apex predatory behavior, when guided by intelligence and ethical development, could become a force for universal improvement rather than destruction. The human exchange program not only continued, but expanded significantly, though with much more comprehensive cultural preparation for both human students and their non-human classmates. Tom's presentation became required study material for cross-species psychology courses throughout the known galaxy. Tom himself discovered a new field of research that perfectly matched his human nature, hunting solutions to the challenges of interspecies cooperation and galactic harmony. He applied the same persistence and dedication that his ancestors had once used to track prey across Earth's ancient landscapes, but now he was tracking down barriers to understanding between civilizations. The Academy established the first department of applied predatory psychology the following year, with Tom as its founding research director. Students from dozens of species came to study how the same instincts that made humans such effective predators also made them uniquely suited to identify and eliminate the problems that prevented different civilizations from working together successfully. Years later, when the first truly integrated multi-species colonies were established beyond the galaxy's core systems, historians would trace their success back to a simple classroom presentation about apex predators. They would note that sometimes the most important discoveries come not from studying how different species can avoid each other's dangerous traits, but from learning how those same traits can be turned toward mutual benefit. After all, some things are worth hunting forever, and the problems that divide civilizations definitely qualify as worthy prey for a species that never stops pursuing its chosen targets.